Daniel Penny, who was acquitted this week in the chokehold death of Jordan Neely, is attending today's Army-Navy football game as the guest of Vice President-elect J.D. Vance. Penny was charged with causing Neely's death by putting the homeless man in a chokehold after he began acting erratically on a New York subway train last year. On Monday, a jury found Penny not guilty of criminally negligent homicide. J.D. Vance posted on X, "Daniel's a good guy, and New York's mob district attorney tried to ruin his life for having a backbone." Back with us, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, history professor at New York University, and joining us now, former New York Congressman Mondaire Jones. Ruth, Mondaire, thank you both very much for coming to the show. Mondaire, let me start with you. Just your general reaction to having Daniel Penny in such august company.
I wouldn't describe it as august company. I mean, I'd rather be doing literally anything else other than hanging out with Donald Trump at a football game. Even if I wanted to be at the football game, I think that liberals have to be careful here. Obviously, what happened in the acquittal of Daniel Penny was very controversial. Some people question the district attorney's decision to prosecute the case at all. I don't agree with that. I don't second guess this district attorney. I think there was a lot of evidence to move forward with, but the jury has rendered a verdict.
Right.
And over the next 4 or more years, there is going to have to be a picking and a choosing of battles. And it's not going to be effective for liberals to make hay of every single thing that Donald Trump does that they disagree with. And I don't think this is one of those things that people should really be engaging with as a criticism of the incoming president.
But let me stick with you just on this for a moment, because, I mean, one of the things that jumps out at me is the signal that it sends. The signal that it sends to America about, and particularly to Black Americans. You know, someone going through a mental episode is restrained. I don't think anybody would begrudge Daniel Penny restraining him, but to the point of killing him. And then this person goes from being in a court to being with the incoming president of the United States at a football game, in some ways being lauded. And for a lot of people, it's a little galling that this is what Trump and Vance are doing, as opposed to they could have had anybody else in that box.
This is like among the least of the controversial things that Donald Trump, a convicted felon himself, has done, right? And obviously Daniel Penny denies that he intentionally killed this gentleman. Tragic story. We should have started with that, right? I mean, this is someone who the system clearly failed at every step of his life. And so, you know, my heart breaks for his family in particular and for his community. But, you know, least surprising behavior ever. Obviously not a choice that I would have made if I were in the position of the former president. But he's leaning into this idea felt by a lot of Americans that America has been overcome by lawlessness. It's ironic, given his own prolific criminality, Donald Trump, that is. But people view crime differently when it's committed by this incoming president versus Black and brown people in this country.
Speak on it, as the people would say. Ruth, let me switch gears here and have you listen to something that Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island had to say on MSNBC on Thursday about whether he thinks Kash Patel and Pete Hegseth will get confirmed, and we'll get your reaction on the other side.
This is not just about getting these two nominees through, these two very troubled and inappropriate nominees through. This is also about conditioning the Republican Senate to be an obedient body. And once they've broken them on this, it becomes easier and easier to force other unpalatable things through the Republican senators.
Ruth, I mean, Senator Whitehouse isn't wrong here, is he?
No, he's absolutely right. And he's also a national leader on anti-corruption issues. He understands these things very well. You know, in an authoritarian context, the purpose of the party, the leader's party, is to defend the leader and solve his personal and legal problems and any financial problems he might have. And so that is the way that many GOP senators and congresspeople are acting. Mm-hmm. And the party becomes kind of hijacked and made into a personal tool of the leader. And so whatever the issue, all that matters is what the leader wants. It's very dispiriting to see the GOP having remade itself in the tradition of so many of the parties I've studied in other countries. And it goes on today in Turkey and Hungary, other countries. And this is exactly an example of it.
Mondaire, I just want to play some sound for you of President-elect Donald Trump on Meet the Press back on December 8th. Just listen to what he had to say, and then I'll explain why I'm bringing this up. Okay, watch this, y'all.
I want on groceries. It's a very simple word, groceries. Like almost, who uses the word? I started using the word, the groceries. When you buy apples, when you buy bacon, when you buy eggs, they would double and triple the price over a short period of time. And I won an election based on that. We're going to bring those prices way down.
So, Mondaire, I bring this up because in his interview with Time magazine, in which he was named Time's Person of the Year, he says, and I quote, "It's hard to bring things down once they're up. It's very hard." This is what he's talking about in terms of grocery prices. Go on.
Yeah. Look, the economy, more than any other issue, was determinative in this past election. And the fact is, while the rate of inflation is close to where it was before the pandemic at this point in time, there is corporate greed. We know what the explanation is for why the cost of groceries and gas is about 20% or more higher than it was before the pandemic. Donald Trump is unwilling to take on the anti-competitive behavior in the marketplace by the oil companies and the gas companies and the meat companies. And so now that he's won this election after campaigning in poetry, horrific poetry, he is now going to walk back all of his promises about reining in the price of goods because he doesn't want to upset his billionaire donors and, of course, the major corporations that have been flooding our system of elections with cash to get him elected.
I know someone who had a plan to do something about this situation, but the people thought otherwise. Ruth, I hear you chuckling. I'll have you have the last word here.
So President-elect Trump wouldn't be the only person to not fulfill some of the campaign promises. But when you have no morals and no fidelity to the truth, and you will say or do anything to get to power and then stay there, which was January 6th last time, it's not surprising that you will walk back things that you said you were going to do. And I also remind viewers that 16 Nobel Prize winners in economics signed a letter warning of the risks to the economy from a second Trump administration. And so here we are.
Yep, and here we are, but we have to go. Ruth Ben-Ghiat and former Congressman Mondaire Jones, thank you both very much for coming to the Saturday Show.